Welcome everyone to the Cognigy AI version 3.4 release webinar. We've come together here today to show you the newest features that we are bringing out with this new version, which we are releasing today. As always in the release webinars, we're going to start with a brief overview of what Cognigy AI actually is for those on the call who haven't worked with Cognigy before or who are just starting their Cognigy AI journey. Cognigy AI is a highly flexible enterprise conversational AI platform to build advanced, integrated conversational automation solutions for customer and employee service. So it's an automation tool that helps you to build automations in a graphical way to automate customer and employee interactions through chatbots, virtual assistants, Alexa, Google Home, or on the telephone lines. Now, if we look at the architecture of Cognigy, there's essentially four main components. The first is channels. Channels are the way that our customers or employees communicate with us. That can be WhatsApp, it can be SMS, it can be Facebook Messenger, it can be Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business. But it can also be something like Alexa or Google Home, or even on the telephone lines if you want to use something like Twilio. It can be an agent tool like UserLike or many other channels that we support. The customers use these channels to communicate with our AIs, and the text they are sending into the system then hits our natural language understanding. This is the AI component of the system. We have our own natural language understanding engine called Cognigy NLU, but we also support hooking in other existing systems like IBM Watson, Google Dialogflow, Lewis, or many others. This component then understands what is the intent of the user's sentence. So what does the user want to accomplish? So if you say something like, I want to order a pizza, the intent could be order food, and the food that you want to order is pizza. Now this extracted information is then given to the automation layer, which helps you determine, okay, what do we do now? What do we answer back to the user? Do we need to pull some information from backend systems, or do we need to trigger an action in a backend system? So if you say, well, I want to order one of the specials today, maybe we need to retrieve the information of what are the specials today from a backend system. Then when the order is actually triggered, we need to write back information into an ordering system. That is the automation layer. And all of that together sits on a first-class enterprise platform that takes care of integration, scalability, security, and compliance. Being a European company, we are, of course, very heavy on compliance around GDPR. I now want to give a very short demo of what this looks like when we use it as a user, and a demo of what it looks like when we actually build the AIs. So here we have what's called a web chat. In this case, it's in the middle of the screen. It could also be on the lower right of the screen here, but in this case, it's in the middle because it's easier to demo. So user comes in, says get started, and gets some information from the bot, a welcome message, some buttons that we can press, and we can press one of these buttons and get the requested information, or we can type something in like show me your plans, and then we're going to get essentially the same result. Now, there's a number of plans here. Some are 4G, some are 5G. Say, oh, we're interested in what this 5G thing is. So we say, what is 5G? We get an answer to that. And then maybe we say, okay, show me 5G plans only. The natural language understanding understands what we mean and now only pulls those ones from the database for us and presents them in this graphical way. Now, there's other things it can do. Like, for example, we could say, I want to know the amount on my last invoice. The AI now recognizes, okay, this is something where we need to be authenticated first, and it asks for our phone number. And I'll just pop in my mobile number, and it's going to send me an SMS. You can't see this right now, but it always sends the same number, which is 12345. If I put in the wrong one, it says, well, you need to authenticate first. So if I put in the right number, it then says, okay, now you're authenticated. Let me see how I can help you. Because you said, I want to know the amount on my last invoice. So the AI remembers what did the user actually want, before we enter the authentication process, then goes in and takes us through the authentication. And now that I am authenticated, I can do other things, like I want to change my address. And it now pulls the address from a system and then lets me edit this if I want to. So do you want to, would you like to change your data? Yeah. And now it takes me through my data and lets me change that. If I don't want to change it, I just press skip. Say we change the zip code. Currently it's 5 times 2. So I changed this to what it really is. The city's Abu Dhabi here, which is not correct because I'm sitting in Düsseldorf. And now it asks me for my date of birth, which currently is the date tomorrow. That's not my date of birth. So I'm just going to put in August 26, 1981, which is my birthday. I could have also used a date picker, but I just typed it in. Now you can see my data has been updated, and it actually has been updated in a backend system. Now that's the type of experience you can create with Cognigy.AI, and you can create that without writing a single line of code. And the way you do that is using Cognigy.AI. You build the AIs in what we call the Cognigy Flow Editor, which gives you a graphical representation of what a conversation actually looks like. So for example, if we press the Get Started button, what we see is, okay, what intent is identified by the natural language understanding engine? It's the Get Started intent, so we are outputting something from this say node. And in here, we can now change the graphical output. We can change the textual output, just like we would, for example, in a web content management system for a website. So if we don't want this to say mobile global, but mobile US, we just change this in here, we save it, and the next time someone comes in and says get started, then we can see the new output. So it's really that easy to create and maintain conversational AI from within Cognigy. So that just as a quick refresher of what Cognigy.AI actually is. And now let's look at the new features for Cognigy.AI version 3.4. Today's presentation has essentially 4 parts. At first, we're going to talk about our Microsoft integration. We've integrated with the Microsoft Bot Framework, and we want to show you the amazing things you can do with that here today on the webinar. We're then looking at productivity features. How are we enhancing the product to make our customers more productive? How do we make it easier to create conversational AIs using Cognigy? We're then looking at our new AI management features, followed up by other enhancements that we put into the product. So let's start with the Microsoft integration. We're going to start with a bold statement. And that statement is, Cognigy loves Microsoft. As I said, it's a bold statement, yet one that is correct for several reasons. Microsoft is pushing the boundaries when it comes to artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence adoption inside the enterprise. Specifically, Microsoft has a strong focus on conversational AI with the bot framework. Microsoft focuses on great user experiences in the business with productivity tools, with all the enterprise tools they have. And most of all, Microsoft follows a philosophy of partnering and open sourcing many of their inventions for others to use. And we are one of the companies that actually benefited a lot from that by integrating a lot of Microsoft's technology directly into our product. Microsoft's answer to conversational AI is the Microsoft Bot Framework. It consists of 3 or 4 components, depending on how you want to look at it. First, there is channels. So we described channels earlier. How do users actually reach our conversational AIs? So it could be Microsoft Teams or a Skype for Business, a web chat, Facebook, or something like that. These inputs then hit what's called Azure Bot Services, an infrastructure layer living on the Azure framework. And then the inputs are handled by the bot framework code. This code can use LUIS for natural language understanding, which is Microsoft's natural language understanding engine. It's a fantastic framework all in all, but the shortcoming is that all bot logic has to be coded and thus resides within the IT department only. It's not easy for business users to make changes to their bots and their logic, but they always have to go to someone who can actually write code in order to do that. Now here at Cognigy, we want to hand the power to the business users. So this is where Cognigy.AI comes in. Cognigy.AI slots neatly into the place that was previously occupied by custom code and gives business users and process owners the ability to design and manage conversations. That way, Developers can focus on building out integrations, etc., whilst process experts can worry about the conversations themselves. Now, of course, Cognigy is much more than just filling the slot for custom code here. It's a fully fledged conversational AI platform with channel connectors and natural language understanding of its own, but with a unique ability to seamlessly integrate into Microsoft Bot Framework stack, and even extending it by connecting it to Microsoft Flow and various other Microsoft services. So how exactly does the integration with Microsoft's technology work? Firstly, there's the new Azure Bot Services endpoint in Cognigy, which allows you to use Cognigy AI's graphical workbench instead of custom code. This allows a previously unprecedented integration with Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business, and other Microsoft tools. For the techies, the connection is fully asynchronous, meaning that you can kick off a process in a backend system, and then after a while, maybe it can be a second, it can be a minute, it can be an hour, or it can be a day, that process can return and notify the user in one of these channels like Microsoft Teams. And we're going to show that in a demo. So that's the new endpoint we're releasing here today with Cognigy.AI 3.4. Next off is adaptive cards. Arguably one of Microsoft's biggest contributions to conversational UI. Because sometimes simple text isn't enough. Of course, you think, well, aren't we talking about chatbots here? Aren't we just exchanging messages back and forth? Well, that's right, but sometimes simple text isn't enough, and we want to display complex information to our users, such as flight information or weather information or an expense report. At other times, we might want to enable users to input information through a forms-based approach, something that's just not possible with normal chat UI. And this is where adaptive cards come into the picture. Adaptive cards are portable, so they work in any app, on any device, and in any UI framework. It's an open library, so the libraries and schemas are open sourced and shared, and Cognigy has now become an active part of that community. They're also declarative, meaning that you don't need to program to build them. You can use JSON to build them, or you can use the tools that we are providing in Cognigy now to build these adaptive cards. So we've enabled deep adaptive card support in our product, not just for Microsoft Bot Framework and our generic Teams connector, but also for our own web chat, because we believe that, well, sometimes you just need that extra bit of power in your user interface to power a user experience that you couldn't just power with text. Of course, Microsoft's ecosystem is much larger than just Microsoft Azure, the Bot Framework, and adaptive cards. It spans a lot of Microsoft services like Microsoft Cognitive Services that analyze language, speech, or images via artificial intelligence. Then there is Microsoft Flow, which is Microsoft's automation framework, and there's Microsoft Graph, which allows interactions with your organization's data like emails, calendars, chats, and more. And Cognigy AI integrates with all of these out of the box in the shape of modules, which are free for any Cognigy AI customer to download, use, and even modify, because we've open sourced them on our GitHub repository. So if there is some function that you're missing in one of these modules, you can download it. You can modify it yourself if you want. Last but not least, Cognigy is a graphical tool set aimed at enabling business users to build conversations. But we don't want to take the ability from developers to write code and extend conversations in that way. To make this even easier, Cognigy AI's code nodes, which are based on Microsoft's Visual Studio Code themselves, have been extended with Typescript support. That way, developers can write type-safe code and be more productive. Errors will be thrown while you're writing the code, not just while you're executing it. And I think anyone who's ever used Typescript will know the power and will really appreciate this new feature. So let's look at what we can do with all this. The demo you're about to see is something that was built in under an hour, maybe 30 minutes, and there was zero code involved. And I'm going to show you later how we build it. It is about creating an account on Cognigy's demo system. So in Cognigy, we have a demo system where prospects can ask us to provide a demo account, and then we can grant the right to access that demo server and play around with Cognigy.AI. We manage these demo system users in a SharePoint list. And whenever a sales rep wants to grant access to the demo server, they have to go into our CRM and check if the user already exists. If they don't exist, they create them and then send an approval email to management for the demo account with that information from HubSpot. The managers then approve or not, and if approved, the demo system creates a user in SharePoint with that information from HubSpot. So it's a process that touches various systems. It touches HubSpot, it touches email approvals, and it touches SharePoint. And it can be quite lengthy and quite involved. And this process can be fully automated through Cognigy.AI, and here exposed in Microsoft Teams. So what you're seeing on the screen here is Microsoft Teams on a mobile. And you can see the Cognigy Assistant has been brought up, and the Assistant has various options for the users. You can create a new demo user, or you can request an invoice. So in this case, we want to create a demo user, but we're not using one of the buttons, but we're actually just typing in what we want to do. And I want to create a new demo user. It's asking us for the email of the user that we want to create, and we're putting that in here. And Cognigy.AI will now go into HubSpot in real time and check if that user already exists. You can see it's super fast. And it came back with the user it found, which is Benny Mayer from Cognigy. And we can now select to create an account for that user or for a different user, because maybe that's not the one, right? Maybe we mistyped the email address or something. So, but in this case, if we do decide, the system will now kick off a Microsoft flow, which triggers an approval process. So now the managers, and I'm a manager myself, receive an approval request from Microsoft Flow, which we can either approve or we can reject it. And say if we approve it, the record will be created in SharePoint, and the user requesting it will be notified automatically within Teams. You can see this here, the new account bot send a card. We click on that and we see request approved, and we can click view in SharePoint to then see that user created directly in SharePoint. So a process that was previously rather involved and could take a lot of time looking up information in the CRM and so on has been fully automated through Cognigy.AI, and in this case here, Microsoft Teams and bot framework integration. And it just prevents mistakes, and it centralizes the whole process in a singular interface, which in this case is Microsoft Teams. Now, let's look at how that was actually built. For that, I'm just going to bring up Cognigy.AI here on the screen. So again, this was built in a Cognigy flow. In this case, the main flow, and you can see it's not a very big flow. It's actually a rather small flow for the automation that we've built. And if I say hi, for example, I get my welcome message, and then I can say I want to create a new user, and then it says give me the email address, and maybe in this case we give it my email address. And it now goes off and it checks for that user in HubSpot, and here we found that user. Now, what's new here is, firstly, this is on the bot framework channel, and you can see previews of the adaptive cards that we've used directly here in the interaction panel. You can see that we're using various modules. So in this case, we're using a HubSpot module, which is a find contact by email, which is one of our out-of-the-box available modules. We are then kicking off a flow here, and this is information that you get from within Microsoft Flow when you create that, with the user's name, email address, and company. And when the user then comes back, we have a flow approval, and you can see that within our editor here, we have an adaptive card preview as well. And you can type directly into it, and you can see previews changing live, just like with every channel we have in Cognigy. And as you can see, you can use full Cognigy script, so Cognigy's token language, directly within the adaptive cards as well. It's really extremely powerful stuff. Now, if you don't want to create those manually, what you can do is you can just copy this JSON, and you can open Microsoft's Adaptive Card Designer, which Microsoft provides for us here on their website, you can paste that JSON in, and then you can manipulate it. For example, you can just drag in a new image. So let's say we just want to use the same image here, and then here we have another copy of that image. And then when you're done, you just copy that JSON over again into Cognigy's editor, and there you go, and you would have a new adaptive card. Now all this is exposed through a new endpoint, which is the Microsoft Bot Framework endpoint, which just works like any other Cognigy endpoint. Now, where does that leave us? Where it leaves us is that what we've done here is we've taken the power of the Microsoft Bot Framework and we've essentially put a content management system on top of it. A conversation creation system, a conversation management system, a conversational AI platform that uses a graphical tool set to hand the power of creating and managing conversations to the business users while still being able to harness all the power of the Microsoft Bot Framework. Next up is productivity, best-in-class productivity. So for every release, we go through a lot of feature ideas that reaches from our community, from our customers, from our partners, from the analysts we work with. And we pick a couple of those that we believe have the biggest impact. We refine them along the way with feedback from our customer and partner advisory councils. And the result of some of these ideas is what we're showing here today. One feedback we got is that customers would like to have the ability to get started quicker. Of course, you can build extremely powerful conversational AIs with Cognigy, but maybe sometimes you don't want to build out the basic infrastructure for an FAQ bot yourself. So what we introduce here is project templates. These templates allow creators of bots to get started a lot quicker by offering these pre-built templates, pre-built projects for the 3 most common types of bots. So firstly, there's FAQ bots, which is essentially a bot answering a series of questions using AI. Still arguably the most used type of conversational AI in the market. Then we have process bots, which is a bot collecting information from the user by asking them a series of questions. And then we have search bots. So that's a bot collecting search parameters from a user and triggering a search in a third-party system. So that could be a product search, for example. And then lastly, of course, there is blank, which simply creates an empty project, and you can just build anything into it. Most conversational AI tools offer users the ability to define a default answer if an intent was found, and these are called default replies. So an intent, for example, let's say, well, I want to order food. It doesn't usually have a default reply because ordering a food is a process, but maybe you could say something back like, well, I'm also very hungry, and that is just a default reply and no logic is needed for it. Or maybe if you say something like, I want to know what Cognigy is, then you could have a default reply that says back what Cognigy is. Now, these replies used to be purely text, not just in Cognigy, but in most conversational AI platforms out there. And Cognigy.AI 3.4 extends this feature dramatically by allowing users to define rich text, structured content replies, which can be tailored to each incoming channel. So we could, for example, show a picture and buttons on a web chat, or output a specially formatted voice blurb on Alexa, or show an adaptive card on Microsoft Teams, all from within the intent editor. So you don't need to enter the flow to do that any longer. You can define this rich context directly in the intent editor. Then there's UX enhancements, and we've added several more UX enhancements, and the most significant one, I believe, is cross-flow editing. Cognigy AI possesses the unique ability to structure natural language understanding intents and flow logic into separate flows. So the ability to seamlessly navigate between them is really important. As a much requested feature, we're now adding the ability to jump between flows directly from the interaction panel and from the flow editor, making that editing experience a lot more seamless. So let's take a look at some of the features that I just spoke about. First up is the project templates. So when I create a new project now, I can choose between blank, FAQ, process, and search. And I can still just give it a name. Maybe I call it that, and then I choose a color for it, maybe green, and I press create. And what it does, it creates the project, it imports the resources into the project, it automatically trains the intents, and then when it's done, we can open the project and work with it. For each project, we have a playbook that lets you then easily test the project. Now, one that I want to show here is the search project, because the search project is a little bit more involved. And here I could, for example, say, I am looking for an employee in Germany. It says, which department are you searching in? HR, and then it says you're searching for an employee in human resources working in Germany. This could come from a database. Right, and it's okay, what about Australia? Search for an employee in human resources in Australia and sales. And then it goes like you're searching for an employee in sales working in Australia. So it's just a flexible pattern that we are showcasing here how it works. Now, one of the other features was that I can switch to another flow, as I said. And what you can do now is if you turn on the expert mode, you'll actually see that the flow was switched. And by clicking on the flow that was switched to, we can jump immediately to the flow. It is a tiny addition to the Cognigy system, yet a very powerful one. And we can jump not just from within the interaction panel, but also directly from within the editors like here. Now, going back to the main flow, I also want to show the default reply. So here we have the help intent. And right now there's no default reply defined. And if we now add a default reply, we can add a reply for any of the channels that we support. So we could show a different reply on Twilio to, for example, the web chat to Google Actions. And maybe I'm just going to showcase this with a web chat. So we could, for example, say, I'm here to help you. And right now that is not rich text because it's just text. So maybe we add we add a bold text here. So if I now save this and I say something like help, you can see we're now immediately getting this default reply. And if I add more default replies for other channels, so for example, we use Alexa and we say, okay, we put in an interjection like abracadabra, I'm here to help you. So this is a speech synthesis markup language from Alexa. You can see we now have two default replies defined, and I can now actually also see both of those here in the intent editor. So really a number of UX enhancements to make editing and creating this kind of thing a lot easier. Next off is AI management. As one of the two pillars of conversational AI, the other one being automation, providing best-in-class tools to manage the AI components so the natural language understanding is crucial. In Cognigy.AI 3.4, we've added various enhancements to both the management of the natural language understanding as well as the AI algorithms themselves. As for management, we've added the ability to group intents by tagging and searching through intents, which makes managing large intent collections a lot easier. As for the AI itself, we firstly added the ability to use system slots in intent example sentences, and secondly, the so-called any slot. The any slot allows you to define a pattern and extract slots dynamically based on that pattern. An example would be the sentence, I want to order a product, where product is the any slot. So product can be anything. Now you mark product as the any slot, and now if a user says, I want to order a car, car is found as a product slot. If you say I want to order pizza, then pizza is found as a product slot. Even better, the AI now learned that a car or a pizza is a product and will find it in unrelated future sentences in this user session as well. So we've really added a lot of smarts to that. The intent trainer is where we use misunderstood user inputs to train the AI further. It's a crucial part of bot training, as it allows our customers to improve their bots whilst in production with real-life examples from what the users are putting in. The intent trainer has been significantly upgraded to allow sorting and filtering, plus a much requested export and import mechanism, which allows our customers to, for example, export all misunderstood utterances from a production environment back to a staging environment, retrain the AI on the staging environment, and then ship the upgraded AI back to the production environment. And there's all kinds of filtering options here that make that a lot easier. So again, let's have a look at these new features in the platform. First off was intent management, where we had things like tagging, right? So I could add a tag here. So this is a help intent, maybe it's a general intent. I save that and the tags are added. You can see those here. And now if I search for, okay, I only want my general intents, there we go. It is filtered in real time and we can just concentrate on those intents. We can of course not just search through the tags, but we can actually also search through the names. So if I have the product intent here, for example, I can search through that. Now, if we look at the any slot, here we've defined an intent where we say, I want to get a product, and you can see how product has a different color here. So that means it's an any slot. And if I save this and I say, I want to get a car, you can see it's the get product intent, and car was found as a product slot. Now, if I say I want to get a pizza, then pizza is found as a product slot, and there's no lexicon involved in exposing those to the AI. And now if I say car, 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 which is not an example sentence for any intent, you can see no intent is found. We're still finding car as a product slot. So the AI remembers that for the session. It has essentially learned that car is a product. Now on the intent trainer, I need to just quickly jump into a different project here where we've imported some intent trainer records. You can see that here we have a couple of hundred records in the intent trainer, and what we can do is we can now filter those, so we can not just sort them by count but also by timestamp when the latest one came in. We can show only understood records and so on, and of course if we then found one like whatever, something with cake, we can attach that to one of the existing intents in this flow or any attached flows. We made it a lot easier to work with those. And I guess the most important new feature here is the export, where we can define a date range of when we want these records from until now. And also the understood ones we export, and then it's automatically downloaded and we can upload it into another system. And there's various different things we can do. We can merge and we can keep existing records and so on. So we really significantly improved the way here how to deal with records that are being used to train the AI with real-life user sentences. Which brings us to other enhancements. And as always, there's a lot more to show. So we've picked the most interesting other new features here. You can see the full list in the release notes later. And there are a number of new channel endpoints. You already saw the Microsoft Bot Framework endpoint. And we also have a new endpoint for RingCentral Engage, one of the most amazing agent tools, I have to say, out there, agent and social media management tools that we now integrate with out of the box. We're also integrating with Smooch, which is a cross-channel framework now owned by Zendesk. We're integrating with Twilio Autopilot and another fantastic agent tool called UserLike. And I encourage you to check all these technologies out to see how they could benefit your organization and how they could then work also with Cognigy. We've also added customizable analytics, because when managing a bot, it is important to measure how well it is doing. And Cognigy.AI has always made it easy to be integrated with systems like Power BI, Tableau, Click, and others by exposing its data as an OData feed. Now, Cognigy.AI 3.4 builds on top of that by giving our customers the ability to customize what analytics data is actually saved. It allows for the addition of arbitrary data to the analytics collection, and in that way enables storing very use case specific information whilst still exposing it to the analytics tools of your choice. So in that way, you could, for example, store a user's chosen city for a booking, or the current weather of the day, or anything you like into the analytics collection and expose it to your BI. On the infrastructure side, Cognigy.AI now fully supports Kubernetes deployments, whether it's on OpenShift, Amazon Elastic Container Services, or Azure Container Services, Kubernetes services. The out-of-the-box support means that installations and upgrades will be even more seamless than before, making it easier for DevOps to manage Cognigy.AI deployments. That's something that we are releasing also with brand new installation and operations manuals in Cognigy.AI 3.4. Now, the last feature we want to talk about today is a rather technical feature, yet one that enables seriously amazing use cases. In fact, we've seen this feature in action before today, where the Microsoft Flow integration called Cognigy.AI back to tell the user that their request was approved. The feature that enables this is a so-called injection API, through which external systems can inject information back into a running Cognigy.AI session after an arbitrary time span. This can be a minute, an hour, or a day. It doesn't really matter what time span it is. And when the third-party system comes back, Cognigy.AI will process that input and send the answer back to the user. This is especially vital when integrating with long-running processes of RPA systems, like, for example, Kofax or UiPath, because these systems sometimes take quite a while to run through their processes. And the system can then come back and notify the user that they're done, or they could come back, request extra information from the user, which we can then provide, and then they can continue with their process afterwards. So it really enables quite amazing use cases and quite amazing automation that you can build with that. Now, lastly, we want to introduce something new here to the webinar, where we always want to give a quick overview of what modules are already available for Cognigy in our community sites on GitHub. And there's two types of modules. There is the backend integrations, and then there is the web chat plugins. And here on the screen, we have some of the backend integrations that are available. So if you go to our GitHub repository at github.com/Cognigy/custom modules, you'll find all of these modules you have on the screen here already available. And they're all open source, right? So you can use them, you can extend them, you can modify them, anything you want. So we have integrations with Zendesk, ServiceNow, Sitecore, Yext, Salesforce, Kofax, UiPath, Here Maps, Twilio, HubSpot, and many, many others. So you don't need to build these from scratch. You can actually just use the modules that we already have. Second up are the web chat plugins. So we also have those on our GitHub under github.com/Cognigy/web chat plugins. And there's a large number of plugins already available. For example, we have a file upload. Of course, we have one for adaptive cards, so you can use adaptive cards in our web chat. We have a Google Maps plugin, actually an amazing plugin also from a design perspective, that allows you to show Google Maps directly within the web chat view, fully touch enabled and everything. We have the data table plugin that allows you to show tables. We have a signature pad so you can collect signatures from your customers. We have a charts plugin and many more, and you can find those on our GitHub, and I encourage you to take a look at those. So that is it for today. And I hope you enjoyed what you saw. This is Cognigy.AI 3.4. It is available now in both the on-premise and SaaS deployments. We are going to upgrade our enterprise environment, our enterprise SaaS environment tomorrow. And if you are running an on-premise installation and you want an upgrade, please reach out to us and we will make this available to you immediately.